Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Sports Science Institute Spotlight on Mental Health Best Practices. My name is Brian Hainline, and I'm the NCAA Chief Medical Officer. And this is our first in a series of webinars that's focusing on mental health best practices. And today, we're going to be really talking about mental health first aid and mental health emergency action planning. Our guests are Josie Nicholson, who's the Assistant AD for Sports Psychology at Ole Miss, and Coach Derek Nix, who's the Associate Head Football Coach of Wide Receivers at Ole Miss. Just a little bit of backdrop. The purpose of these webinars is to review and refresh for the NCAA membership the NCAA Mental Health Best Practices, which were first published in 2016 as guidance to the membership about mental health on college campuses. And this document was endorsed by 25 of the leading mental health and medical, scientific, and licensed mental health provider organizations in the country. And then it became association-wide legislation in that every member school is to have in place mental health best practices consistent with this document. So what we're doing in these webinar series is we're providing really examples from the membership of how they've really operationalized the mental health best practices on their own campus. And we're also preparing the membership for an update of the mental health best practices, which will be coming in January 2024. And that update is upon the recommendation of the Committee on Competitive Safeguards and Medical Aspects of Sports. It's going to be incorporating some newly developed cultural sensitivity issues, and it's going to be taking a deeper dive into some newer topics that we understand can negatively impact mental health, such as NIL or social media, corruption in sport and gambling, and suicide contagion. We're also going to be addressing some survey that we've obtained from the membership in which student athletes don't necessarily feel comfortable in supporting one another in mental health. They don't always feel certain about where to obtain mental health care. And there's sometimes a concern about not prioritizing a culture of wellness and mental health care seeking. So let's now turn to our guests, and really Josie and Coach Nix, really a huge thanks for being here. And maybe if you could just introduce yourselves to the membership, tell us a little bit about who you are and your role at Ole Miss.
All right, Brian, thanks for having us. I'm really excited about this series. So I'm Dr. Josie Nicholson. I'm the Assistant Athletic Director for Sports Psychology here at Ole Miss Athletics. I'm going into my 12th year here at Ole Miss, and I direct the sports psychology, mental health, and mental performance services here in the department.
And Coach?
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm Derek Nix, the receiver coach here and assistant head coach. I'm starting my 16th season here at Ole Miss. It's been a whirlwind, to say the least. 4 different head coaches, about 7 or 8 different offensive coordinators. But living in Oxford, being a part of the university, it was nothing I would change about the whole experience. It's been awesome for me and my family to be here.
Well, thanks so much to both of you. And Josie, it's great to be with you again. We've done so much work over the last 10 years together, and you've been such an enormous resource to the membership. So really a huge shout out to you. And maybe I'll start with you, Josie. Before we get into mental health first aid, why is work around student athlete mental health at the college campus so important to you? What drives you to be such a national leader in this issue?
Well, I love our athletes. Having been a college athlete, albeit at a different level, I understand it's something that the athletes are so passionate about their craft, and yet there's so much stress and expectation and demand put on them. So balancing all that is difficult, and it's really happening at a time when they're trying to figure out who they are, who they want to be. Can they be that person? Can they excel and succeed at the levels that they want to succeed? And so providing that resource and that support holistically is really important. And so I'm so excited that mental health care and mental performance has been part of this picture more and more every year that goes by. And the work that you've done, Brian, to call attention to it and really put it at the forefront of everyone's mind has been really exciting.
Well, thanks. And, Coach, I've been on the job at the NCAA as chief medical officer for 10 and a half years, and I've just seen a sea change in what's been happening with mental health in terms of athletes and coaches being much more accepting of reducing the stigma of mental health care seeking. It used to be you just kind of suck it up or man it out and don't talk about mental health issues. And a lot of our data demonstrated that this was even more problematic for our athletes of color. So can you share with us a little bit of how mental health became important to you as a coach in your work with student athletes?
Brian, the first thing I can say is just like Josie, being a former athlete, and being recruited and going through all the expectations. And I think it's kind of a new world for them. You talk about the African American experience. Sometimes some of these guys have pressure from their families back at home. It might be a sibling. Sometimes it might be in positions where they have to be a father a little bit early on than expected. I think having this availability of having, the mental health first aid available to them and letting them know it's okay. This is like you said, when I grew up, it would maybe have shown a sign of weakness if you say, well, maybe I need to talk to somebody or maybe I need a little help. And I think now that it's becoming more common, it's becoming more out in the open. Coaches like myself getting more educated on how to really respond to your guys has helped out a ton. So
they're kind of at that crossroad between adolescence and adult, but their brain is still taking shape. And we have to understand that they have feelings like everyone else, but sometimes we objectify these athletes, we glorify them, and we forget that, they have the same feelings that so many other people their same age have. And it seems to me that you have a keen understanding of that.
Yes, sir. I couldn't agree with you anymore.
Yeah. So, let's get, Josie, you and I spoke earlier about the fact that you brought mental health first aid to all of the coaches at Ole Miss. And excuse me, before we get into that, can you just tell us what mental health first aid is?
So mental health first aid is a program that started in Australia, and it's really evidence-based and pretty thorough, in my opinion, in terms of first aid. And it's it's a very structured course that starts with how kind of the role of a person in a mental health situation or in the mental health of friends, colleagues, population of interest, that sort of thing. And then it teaches people how to recognize early signs that that somebody might be, struggling or having a challenge with their mental health. And it progresses to teaching how to recognize when those challenges might be getting worse. And then it moves into crisis mode, how to intervene, how to help during a mental health crisis. And for all of it, it provides a backdrop of an action plan that can be enacted in any order, in any way. And it teaches people how to have the conversation, how to approach somebody that may be having a challenge, and then how to listen non-judgmentally, which is actually, I think most of us know, more difficult than it sounds. And then how to encourage them to get professional help and how to help themselves and how to connect them with the resources. So the entire course has some pre-work that's about 2 hours for people to complete. And then once that's completed by themselves, we come together in person and it's 8 hours of instruction and then about 20 minutes or so of post work. So it's a time commitment, but I think it provides some really practical things for people to do to raise their confidence level that they can support someone that's having a challenge with their mental health.
Well, so Josie, first of all, it doesn't surprise me that somehow you're at the forefront of getting an entire athletics department certified in in mental health first aid because I've seen your leadership and I want to come back to the logistics of that. But Coach, if I can ask you, what was it like when you first heard from Josie or from others that all the coaches were going to take mental health first aid? What was that like at first? And then what's your experience been like after you've taken that course?
At first, probably like a lot of our athletes, not 100% sure, like, okay, why are we doing this? But as you get into it, you get to learning, and you think about, again, like we said earlier, all the difficulties that all these athletes face each and every day. I learned a ton just on how to approach a kid with maybe having some type of mental crisis, being a better listener, listening to what's really going on in their life, what's affecting them, trying to do a better job of finding a solution and be able to help them. And then, of course, and just kind of following up, getting them in the hands of the people like somebody like Josie or that's really educated in that area too, to take it a step further.
So, Coach, do all of your team, all of the student athletes that are part of your football team, do they know that you've taken this mental health first aid?
I believe they all do.
Because I know if I were an athlete, well, I am an athlete, well, I'm a former athlete, well, I still compete. There's a sort of a mouthful there, but as an athlete, knowing that my coach has been trained in mental health first aid, it just seems to me that I would say, hey, I'm going to be more comfortable speaking to this person because, they've been trained in this. They know what it's about. Do you get that sense that maybe you have a different kind of confidence about being able to listen to athletes' concerns and maybe how you interact with them might be different because of this course?
I definitely do. I think it's immediately changed my approach on how I coach and how I deal with each kid individually. It's made me be more aware of what they have going on outside of football. You always learn as a coach, you should know your players well enough when they step through the door. If something is good going on in their life or bad, but it's made me to take a little bit more initiative to dive into, I would say just their personal lives, but just their feelings and, how's school going, how's life going, how your parents going. And I think the more they build that trust, the more they see you more than just an X and O coach, but a guy that, if I really do have an issue or something else I need to talk about, I can confide in this guy and he'll be able to help me.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, it's so inspiring. So, but Josie, walk us through just sort of the logistics of this, because if I remember right, under your guidance, you've now had more than 200 or so coaches and administrators trained in mental health first aid. So how did you pull this off and how difficult was it to just get this through the athletics department?
I think once I presented the practical nature and what it was going to do for our department, my boss, Shannon Singletary, and our athletic director, Keith Carter, were on board and said it makes sense. And, the first thing was kind of presenting it that, it is practical, it is helpful, that it's not just something that helps coaches and staff, interact with athletes in a different way, but we interact with each other. These coaches are under tremendous strain and pressure, and more is being demanded of them also. And our staff, I mean, it's a very fast-paced, high-pressure environment in general. And so being able to know that we all have these skills and we can all, support each other and elevate the department that way, lifting each other up is phenomenal. So I think it's also, if you look at the certification is good for 3 years, it's literally one day out of 1,000. So selling it that way really helped to help it make sense, because every athletic department does mental health training, but the time commitment was such that it had to be sold as this is going to be helpful for everybody, and how it is. So that was the first piece. And then the second piece was just saying, we're going to roll it out as required, and required for everybody, because first of all, if you really sit down and you go through the roster of an athletic department, it would just be too much to say who needs it and who doesn't. I mean, we all need it. We all need to support each other. And I think some people actually learned ways to help themselves as well. So we just made it a blanket. It's going to be required. So once it was required, I went and I talked directly with Lane Kiffin about it and said it is going to be difficult to find a time. But once we figured out that that we could break it down into 4 2-hour segments, that I sat down and we said, okay, when is everybody going to be in town? One of the tricky pieces is that there's only 30 people allowed in a class, because the class is very interactive. There's group activities and discussions and everything like that. So that piece is important. So I started in March, skipped April, and then in May just started saying, when can people do a class, and built classes and scheduled classes around that. So women's basketball said, here are dates that we can do a class. I said, wonderful. Built the class, and then opened it up to, anybody else that wanted to fill in those other, the leftover, up to 30 seats. So it has been a very, very interesting and fun and very busy summer, just knocking those classes out. There was one week where I was involved in 4 different classes with co-instructors, just bouncing from one to the other. I'd say, okay, I'm going to be an hour late today, so you cover it, and I'll be right in on the back end, just trying to get them scheduled. But it was well worth it, and I feel like I got a lot better as everything went along. So the logistics, I think, it is time consuming, but I really believe that it's so worth it. One of the other logistics that I would say is that having somebody culturally competent in the world of athletics to teach the course is vital. You can go to mentalhealthfirstaid.org and find an instructor in the area. I believe it's problematic because mental health issues can manifest differently in athletes, and also they can fly under the radar because of their environment and their experiences as well. Also, connecting athletes with resources is going to look a little bit different in an athletic department than the general population. So I believe that is absolutely vital. So having my coworker, Brian Simmons, get certified as an instructor was part of the logistical piece that was important.
You mentioned something, Josie, that's going to be a recurring theme of these webinars. It seems that when everyone did this, it almost shifted the culture. There was a buddy system, and it wasn't just for helping the student athletes, but you're helping each other. And so you're really transforming a culture this way. And let me ask you, Coach, did you get a sense that there is more of a awareness or a buddy system, or you're all here for each other, in taking this course?
No question about it. Being in our whole football staff, being in there, I heard the word culture coming up. Guys that grew up in California compared to me growing up in Alabama, certain ways that they have dealt with mental disorders or mental health situations way different from what I experienced. And hearing some of these guys talk, how they would handle things and what they've done, opened my eyes up a ton, put me in position to be a lot more open-minded. And obviously that helped me with the transition. And I think that also helps with our players. They all come from all different walks of life. Some are more accepting than others. Some have never been exposed to the differences or hearing any of this. And, you think that you're supposed to be tough. You think you're supposed to be able to push through everything. You're supposed to be able to handle everything on your own. So being able to get into that setting with Josie and the rest of the staff helped me out a lot, just to hear getting in different groups here, the other guys' opinion and other people's opinion of how they felt about it.
Okay. So, well, thanks for that, Coach. So, Josie, this is a simple question. With all your hard work and having put this together, you think it's worth it?
I cannot even stress enough how worth it I think it is. The response has been tremendous. I would not expect a football coach, a basketball coach, an academic, learning specialist, people, we have so many demands on our time. I wouldn't expect somebody to see, oh, you have a required training and it's 8 hours long, to be ecstatic about that. And so, I sent out one email that goes to the entire staff, and I had some people like give me some quotes about their experience in the course. Like, I feel more confident being able to walk through mental health challenges with an athlete, or, just stuff like that. And one of them that I loved was like, that was not nearly as boring as I thought it was going to be. So, I mean, just the truth of it, everybody's like, once the classes started going, people were appreciative and saw the value so quickly that it was easier and easier and easier for people to sign up. And I see the culture shift just in the way, people are responding to me and my concerns about athletes, or, various things. And it's been absolutely worth it. I think one of the things, if I could add, Brian, that will come up for anybody looking to do this, which Temple Athletics, by the way, it has very recently gotten their athletic department on board too. So they are either all certified by now, or they are getting that way. So shout out to Temple Athletic Owls for that. One of the things that comes up, though, is funding, because this is something that is affordable for even smaller resourced athletic departments. Once you have somebody within the department that, like myself, that's trained as an instructor, I believe that is around $1,500. I'm not sure, which is a chunk. But again, I'll stay certified. It's $23.95 per person to go through the course. There are supplemental materials. There's a processing guide that I would recommend, and it's $9.95. And then there is an $18.95 manual, but you get a PDF of both of those that you can download for free once you enroll in the class. So, $23.95 per person per class is what the athletic department would pay to mental health first aid for that course. I think that's an important point to make as well.
All right. Yeah. So Coach, do you remember when Coach Kiffin first presented this to you, what your response was like initially? And was he with all of the football coaches, or how did that happen, if I may ask?
Yes, he was with all the football coaches. Coach Kiffin, man, he really was like supporting this thing with open arms. He was really selling it to us, how important it is. Coach Kiffin is, one of the smarter coaches in the country. So if he is on board with it, you all kind of fall in line, and you just kind of got to go up with it. And when you see your head coach that interested, that enthused about learning, you can't help but kind of follow his lead. And like I said, my opinion about it changed drastically once we got started.
Yeah, and the one of the real statistics out there, which has always been so meaningful to me, is that it's unequivocal that the coach is the single most important influence in a student athlete's life, and really having this transformation at Ole Miss, where there's such an emphasis not just on, okay, mental health is important, but we're going to do our work and become really knowledgeable about mental health. It's so inspiring, and I hope that this sort of kindles a response across the country. So really hats off to Ole Miss for that. Josie, I wanted to ask you, in the best practices, we speak about a mental health emergency action plan. And how would you differentiate mental health first aid from still also the importance of rehearsing a mental health action plan or emergency action plan? So by that, I mean, if someone is acutely psychotic or paranoid or suicidal, is that part of the mental health first aid? Do you approach that differently?
Well, I think part of the mental health first aid, what it does for somebody is when they're not a trained licensed mental health professional and they encounter those situations, they don't freak out. They know exactly what to do because we talked about it. We talk at length about, not just who do you call, but how do you go through that conversation and how do you interact with somebody that is psychotic until help can get there. So I think the confidence that it gives people is wonderful. I put together a PDF for all the coaches and staff that includes all of our mental health procedure and protocol. And I encourage them just to look and say, okay, what is your role? Most of the time it's to contact the athletic trainer or, a member of the sports psych staff. So, going through that. But then I think when you have confidence and you aren't immediately overwhelmed by fight or flight, it is easier to think through a situation. So we have the action plan, the mental health emergency action plan, which I'm not sure, honestly, beforehand that we had gone through with our coaching staff because it was always, you'll just call the athletic trainer. And then we, with the sports medicine staff, had rehearsed all that out. But I think it's important for everybody to know. But when you approach those situations with confidence, it's way easier to think through those things and know, okay, here's how the action plan is going to unfold, if that makes sense. Because when you are overwhelmed by that fight or flight, it's hard to think through anything and remember, okay, what was the action plan? I know we rehearsed it, but who was so, also I think there was this was one of the motivations I had to do this course with everybody was that there's been kind of a growing sense over the past few years. Okay, don't discuss mental health, particularly with athletes, because we're not trained. We're not, that's not our lane. And with the way that mental health is being utilized in the transfer portal with waivers and everything, and the national news around it, I think everybody was just kind of really tense and in kind of a scared position with it. So being able to say, no, we could have these conversations, then I think a lot of times what athletes need is to feel heard, to feel supported, and maybe they don't necessarily need to come to the sports psych office. So things that may become an emergency may never reach that place because they've been supported earlier in their challenge.
Yeah, and that early support is so important. Coach, I've had the privilege of working with a lot of football coaches, and I'm just amazed at how data driven they are while they really care so much about their student athletes. So they care about them as human beings, but also as a coach, you want to win. So performance is really key. And for the first time, we're talking about mental health and performance and injury prevention in the same way we're talking about physical health. So as an example, if you see that someone's landing biomechanically improperly and they're going to be at risk for hurting their ACL, you'll make certain there's an intervention. But we also now have really compelling data that mental health disorders can predispose to physical injury. Or that if you're injured in the rehabilitation phase, if you develop a mental health disorder, it's going to prolong that. So do you see this link where now it's not just physical health linked to performance, but mental health linked to performance and injury prevention? Does that seem like a stretch, or does that seem really more and more realistic to you?
I think it's really realistic. Everybody say, the brain is a muscle as well. And I think you have to train it just like you do, quads, calf muscles, biceps, things of that nature. You want to be in position that you're only as strong as you are mentally for the rest of your body. I can go up and teach a guy how to run post routes, how to go block, how to go run the ball between A and B gap. But if they're not there mentally, if their brain is not into it, if they have something else going on outside of football or outside of class or in their personal life that I can't help them get straight, then it doesn't matter what the athletic ability they have. So I think there is a very, very strong link to these guys who are mentally and having them prepared and making sure that any other distraction, that's probably the wrong word for it, but anything they might have going on is challenging in their lives to make sure that they're clear.
So I'm going to take that brain as a muscle analogy one step further. I think it's a great analogy. Do you mind if I write that down and use that in the future? So for my future talks, but when we look at the muscle, for example, and you know this as well as anyone, if you're doing really, really heavy weights one day, you're not going to do the same muscle groups the next day because you're going to allow them to recover. And then that allows the muscles to really be at a higher compensation level. And so this idea that you want to push the muscles, but it's also balancing how they recover and so forth. And does that ring true for you in mental health too, that you push, but you also need to be able to recover and be in that place of balance?
No doubt about it. You just said it. You don't want to go in and do bench press Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. You might do it on Monday. You don't do it again until Thursday. Tuesday, you might do legs. It's kind of the same way with your mental preparation. You might train one half of it here on Monday, Tuesday, something else. Stress, lifting weights is also a stress that you want to put onto your body to get stronger. Also, mentally, you deal with different stresses. Friday nights, Josie probably started this 3 years ago. And just for the fact of, guys being overstressed, just a relaxation period to have these guys mentally in tune about what they're going to do the next day. So I think that is exactly correct.
Yeah, that's great. Josie, you and I have to remember that when we do our mental health talk, about the brain as a muscle, and then we'll develop a periodization schedule for, overreach and recovery and so forth. I really like that. We're just kind of getting to our closing minutes. Josie, anything else you want to share about how, your experience taking the entire athletics department through this, really, once again, being a leader in the country, but how has that shifted the culture and what would you like to see even going forward?
Well, I think that, again, just everybody supporting each other and it's not necessarily even explicit. I mean, I think that there's just kind of this air that, okay, we're all going through something. And so maybe being a little bit more polite in the halls, or when somebody says, hey, how's it going? Knowing that they actually mean it. That's been great. And small things that I think used to be dismissed or kind of ignored, or I'm going to mention that to sports psych or encourage them to see sports psych. They're now opening up conversation around it. So there's a lot more engagement, and that's been wonderful. Going forward, I'd love to see it just kind of be the standard, that we dedicate so much time to training in all these different areas. And this is one that is just so important and can really make a difference in the lives of athletes and coaches and staff members. So seeing it as, this is something that elevates the mental health of the department, including the athletes, but also the performance. I know, one of the things that every learner is required to do in the course is to create a self-care action plan, things that you are actually going to do to maintain your own mental health. So self-care is a big part of it. And we can't be reminded of that enough. I think in athletics, I'll be bold and say we're not great at it. And so I think there's some teasing going on. There's actually been a little bit of competition with some of the coaches, like in another sport, saying, what did you do this week for self-care? Well, I did this, and I took time for this, and it's like, let's make mental health competitive, right? So I'd love to see that continue and become the norm, where people see this as, yeah, it's mental health. It's at least worth a 10-hour commitment.
And Coach, we'll let you have the last word on this. And again, I'm just so grateful that we're starting off this webinar series with a coach. I know in my sport, which is tennis, my tennis coaches have been probably the most influential people in my life. Football coaches really are a model for what it means to really work with an entire team and individuals. And you have a lot of say in the world of coaching. So again, my gratitude for your being here. But what would you like to say to your fellow coaches? First, your fellow football coaches, but maybe all coaches, about how you would like to see things going forward with regard to mental health.
I think that it is more prevalent than you think. I think that these kids, again, have a lot going on outside of the 3 hours or 2 hours they're with us for football. They have a lot more to handle than just showing up on game day. I think it is our duty, especially as us being college coaches, not professionals, to understand them, to make them feel comfortable enough to where they can come and ask you a football question, where they can also come and ask you something that, hey, they're going through some post-traumatic stress, that you feel confident enough that you might be able to help them and guide them in the right direction. And kind of like Josie said, a lot of them are going to say they're fine, they're doing well. But if you got to do a great job of prying in anyway and finding out the other issues, and because we're all dealing with something. Probably the last thing I just heard, and it kind of jogged my memory, is the self-care. And I've been indirectly doing it myself. That just because you take care of yourself and maybe take a little bit of a breather away from your job or away from your coaching profession for a little bit, maybe to do something relaxing, be with your family, go fishing, go for a walk, inhale, exhale, whatever, take 30 minutes. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think for years and years and years, if you did anything in that realm, everybody thought, well, maybe he's not all in. Maybe he's not tough enough. And I think all of this mental health training has helped me to accept, man, this is part of the norm. This is part of what you need to do in order to be at your very best.
Well, those are really words of wisdom. So, Josie, Coach, I can't thank you enough. This is really invaluable for the membership. We are going to also now have time for question and answers. So feel free to type your questions into chat, and then we'll be addressing them. So look forward to that. And again, thanks so much. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and we'll continue on with this journey. Thank you.